you doing? Welcome back. We've been doing an awful lot of planting here since about the middle of February or so, but we're about to get a grip on it, and we have most of our containers planted at this point. About all of the pots, baskets, and planters are done. A lot of the flat flowers, bedding plant flowers, we about have those all done. So we're kind of ready to start moving on to something else, something that's pretty important here. If you've been watching our videos, you've been seeing Trina taking a pair of scissors and trimming a lot of plants. And we trim just about everything we grow here at the greenhouse. There's a few items that we don't, but about every basket requires a little bit of trimming. There are many different ways to control growth. You can do that through a chemical growth regulator. And if you ever shop at a lot of the big box stores and you see these baskets that are tight and compact, and that's not by accident. A lot of that is growth regulator. And the bigger companies, greenhouses that grow for the big box stores, they have that mastered. And it is an important tool that you can use, but it's also that it can be used too much. I've seen a lot of times, and you probably have too if you've bought plants from your big box stores, a lot of times they just never do grow. And sometimes that is because of growth regulator. A lot of the bigger growers, they grow plants to ship just about as much as they do to sell, because they need to get as many in that truck as they can get in there. And they like to send them out nice and tight, compact, tough, so that they're not brittle. And a growth regulator, chemical growth regulator, can do that. We use a little bit of that on our mums in the fall. There are many different kinds. There are some that are so aggressive that I am scared to death of it, and I wouldn't dare try them because I'm afraid I wouldn't want to sell a plant that is just going to sit there and not grow. We do use some of that on our geraniums also. It kind of helps to force lateral branching and stop vertical stretching. So it's important. But we use some less aggressive ones, and that's kind of about all that I'm willing to do. A lot of times your mom and pop greenhouses, when you get plants from there, they will just grow to beat the band, and it's because a lot of times smaller greenhouses don't want to use or are afraid to use the really aggressive growth regulators. So that is the reason we trim. We do a few different things to keep plants from stretching. You've heard me talk about my little nursery greenhouse across the driveway there. We run it warm, around 68 degrees, and that gets plants germinated and growing, but we don't leave it at that temperature forever. We will get them going, and then we'll move them to another greenhouse that will run a lot cooler. For this greenhouse in particular, we've got it down to about 53 degrees at this point, because cool temperatures will help to slow down stretching. And if you have a plant that is, and this can go for any of your seeds that you're starting under lights or anywhere else, like tomatoes or cabbage or peppers, a lot of times you'll see them germinate and come up, and they'll really stretch. And there's two different reasons that cause that. One of them is your temperatures are too warm after they've germinated and started growing, and another one is lack of light, or it could be a combination of the two. So I have read that if you're germinating inside and you're using grow lights, that those grow lights need to be down really, really close, within just a few inches of the plants that you're germinating, so that when they come up, they're exposed to a lot of light. So if you are doing that in the house, you want to be sure and get your grow lights really close, and that kind of will help that stretching. But as you can see here, every variety of plant is a little different from the other. And some of them will just naturally want to stretch more. Even in the same species of plant, you'll have some petunias, for example, that are more of a mounding type, and some that are more trailing. And you kind of, in my business, I have kind of figured out which ones I prefer to grow which ones I think will do best for the customer throughout the summer, and you'll try new ones and you'll weed some out. It's kind of like back when we were milking cows. You've got to cull cows that just aren't going to be profitable. Well, it's the same way with plants. You kind of have to learn how to cull plants out, and we've done that over the years. We've gone through all different kinds, and we'll continue to go through them. I like to add something new every year to kind of try and see, because you never know what you're really going to like and what you're not. So it's worth trying a few different things each year. But you can see this verbena basket here is really stringy, and even though we're running it cool in this greenhouse, it's still going to stretch. It's just the nature of it. And I'm going to turn this camera down and I'll show you just exactly how we trim these baskets. We're going to take each and every one of our baskets down and trim it up and get it nice and round and even, and then by the next time it grows back out again, it will be ready to bloom and ready to sell. So we try to do this right around the 1st of April, and that gives this plant 2 to 3 weeks to come back, and it's ready to go just in time for our customers. So the timing can be tricky because the temperatures can change everything. If it would get hot and stay hot, then they would come back a little bit quick, and you get into that wondering whether you should trim or not when it's time to sell plants. And that's a little bit tricky, but it's very important to trim. And for you as a homeowner, that is something that you'll want to remember throughout the whole summer. You're going to be a lot better off to trim your plants, and if you like wave petunias or vining type petunias, trailing petunias, it's very important to trim those. The newer varieties don't require the deadheading of the blooms like they used to. You're much better off to trim the plant back, and that forces new growth. And I'll show you here on this plant. Get this camera turned down there, and I'll show you an example of where we cut and why we cut it and what's going to happen after we cut it. All right, guys, this is an example. You can see this is a verbena limb, and verbena is just a trailing. You can see kind of what the bloom is going to look like here. This is kind of a round bloom, but you can see that limb there way out over the edge of the basket. Okay, on that limb, ever so often it branches out. See those new little ones coming right there? Okay, it's kind of like suckers on a tomato. It's kind of the same deal. All right, and down here are some more. You can see those. All right, what we want to do is we will trim this back just about an inch from the edge of the basket. Okay, what we're going to do when we do trim that, and I'll kind of show you with this limb here, when you trim that limb off, okay, you are going to stop the stretching of that limb, the vertical growth of that particular limb. And what you're going to do from where you cut it back to the pot, everywhere there is a break in the main stem, okay, you're going to send out new growth. So if this was what we had left on the pot, in the pot there, each one of these would become new growth. So what that does, when that forces new growth, it makes a fuller, more lush basket, and in the long run, you're going to have a lot more blooms. Instead of just having 10 or 15 limbs around the edge of this basket here, you're going to just be loaded with little limbs, because you're going to have 5 or 6 at every break that are going to try to branch out and do their thing. So very important that we do this, and it will get a lot of new fresh growth for you whenever you're growing through the summer and your baskets start looking a little bit ratty. This is critically important with wave petunias. If you see that it's getting too lanky and ratty and you're getting some dead in the center, that is a sure sign that you need to trim that basket back. And you don't have to be afraid of trimming, and I'm going to show you here in just a minute an example of how I do that. I would say every 3 weeks, if you would give your basket at home a trim and just kind of keep it evened up and keep that fresh growth coming instead of letting it go to seed. A lot of times if the plant gets mature and it goes to seed, it thinks it's done, and then it will go backwards and it's hard to recover it. But if you're trimming it, it's all the time sending out new growth, and it'd be much more lush, kind of like your yard. You mow your grass, you're going to have more lush grass. If you don't, it's going to head out and it's going to be done. So it's basically the same thing. But we do this with just about every basket. We've just got hundreds of them in here to pull down and trim up, and we get them evened up, and that will have them ready for when it's time for them to be ready. It's not time yet. We don't want them blooming yet. We're not afraid of cutting off blooms right now. One more reason that we like to trim them at this point is we like to get them evened up so that they're all being taking up water at the same rate. Some varieties are much more vigorous growers, and they get big and you've got a lot more foliage. They get drier quicker than the other varieties on the same drip line. So that's a problem. You'll have some of these baskets that will dry out quicker than others, and you're either running some too wet or you're running some too dry. So if we get these all cut back and evened out, then that evens out your water, and it's a huge help. I've been hand watering the bigger ones here for the last week or week and a half, and I haven't got time for that. So we get all these cut back, get them evened up, get them all the same size. They'll take up the same amount of water, and then by the time they grow out again the next time, then you're just about to the point where you're having to water them every day, and that's, you don't have a problem with too much water at that point with this size basket. So anyway, I'm going to just kind of show you how I go about trimming these so that you'll have an idea and kind of take some of the fear out of it. If you've never done this before, you'll see that it's not nearly as critical, or it's not as complicated as you might think. So I'll set the camera back up here so that you can watch that. Alright, so what we do is just take a pair of scissors and start shearing. There's no science to it. Really quite simple. Try to take the end off of every limb that you can find. Even if it's a short one, you're better off to take the end off of it. You're going to have a much fuller basket if you do that, in the center especially. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but I'm seeing 2, 4, 6 new limbs that's going to come out of that one stem right there and help to fill that center in. So we'll just keep right on trimming here. We have had a beautiful day here today. Yesterday we had a real scare. They were talking like we might get, at one point they were actually talking like we might get a foot of snow or more, and it kind of depended on where it lined up at as far as accumulation, and we've dodged another bullet. We didn't get any at all, just a few flakes. So that was a big help. I'm always concerned with my greenhouse. This Gutter Connect greenhouse is, of course, it's connected in the center by a rain runoff gutter, and really the weight has nowhere to go unless you can get it melted off. Well, it's not hard to do sometimes, to get that melted off. You just turn the heat on in the greenhouse and let it go. But if you have a really heavy snow, it's hard to melt that off as fast as it falls. I was telling somebody the other day, I really should try to figure out just how many tons of weight I have hanging in this greenhouse right now, pulling down on those bows. We've got probably 12 or 1,300 hanging baskets of all different kinds hanging in here, and you put 6 or 8 inches of wet snow on top of that, you might have a serious problem. So it's a concern. My other greenhouses are a ground to ground, they're called, so I don't worry nearly as much about those, because the snow will just slough right off onto the ground. It's no problem. Really easy to get the snow off them, but I have had it to land right down in the center of this gutter and lay there, and I mean, the water will be just pouring out the gutter, but you still can't hardly get it melted off quick enough sometimes. So that was really my concern yesterday, but we dodged a bullet, thank goodness. And looks like this weather is just about to break today. For the rest of the week it might be a little rainy, but it's going to be warm. hopefully we're going to get some plants going out of here. We've got some cabbage and broccoli that's ready to put out, and some pansies, violas that are ready to go now. So hopefully this week we'll begin to start getting a little bit of business. Turned old Jarvis, our calf, out today. I'll have to do another video on him. He's really doing good now. He's growing, and put him out on the pasture and let him run and play today. Nice, warm, sunny day. He seemed to really enjoy that. All right, guys, one more thing I wanted to show you that's always kind of neat is the black petunia that I was telling you about. We have some of those that are starting to bloom now. And before I get off here, I wanted to show you that. All right, there it is. It's called Black Mamba. And they're really, really interesting, and they're very popular. It's kind of hard to believe that a black petunia would be that popular, but we mix them in with a lot of oranges. And I'll show you here one of our mixes, orange and yellow, and then the black. It's kind of an interesting. It's in one of our Bloom Masters there. But anyway, there's one. I just wanted to show you guys that. So I better quit running my jaws and get back to work. Trina's going to be out here shortly, and we'll really go through these baskets, and we need to because we've got a lot of other things that we need to be doing. The clock is really ticking right now. About the middle of April, we get so busy that we haven't got time to do anything else but water and sell. So we got a lot of things to get wrapped up. So thank you guys for watching. We'll catch up with you on the next video.